Welcome back to the Whole Person Podcast. I am your host, Evan Herrman. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking with a friend of mine about what it means as a man to take care of your body and how taking care of yourself also has ripple effects, not only on your mental health, but also how it actually helps take care of your family. And so today I want to introduce my friend, Dr. Travis Ring, to the podcast. Travis, how are you?
Doing great, Evan. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet, man. You know, I've known you, golly, probably 6, 7 years now.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yep. I came to Travis because, man, I tell you what, my back was hurting and he's a chiropractor and he helped adjust me and get it right back into place. And so over the years, I've learned a lot about the central nervous system, and he knows far more about it than I do. But something that I've been learning is how the central nervous system not only affects our body, but our mental health. And so, Travis, I want to ask you this question today, because a lot of guys might not get a chiropractic adjustment, but how does it actually help mental health?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the main point is realizing that the nervous system controls and coordinates everything. Every organ, system, function, every cell in your body is under strict control from the nervous system. So that's your brain, your spinal cord, and then as it travels down, it branches out and goes to places like the heart and the lungs and the kidneys and the liver and all these other areas and cells. So there isn't a single thing that goes on in your body without it being under control of your nervous system. It's also important to realize too that whenever your body's in stress, it's going to kind of like backfeed into the brain, and it can cause a lot of a lot of mental fog, and it can even lead to things like just being anxious and having some depressive type thoughts. Whenever you feel better, you think better, and that's kind of the main thing for sure. Now, go back to your point about guys don't get adjusted. You're right. Guys typically wait until something is bloody or they're dragging a limb before they take care of their health. But I've always found and have been a huge proponent of, if you can be proactive and not reactive, you'll be far better off.
Yeah. And, so for those of you who don't know this, I interviewed Mark Cuban once for 5 minutes. And it's the only time I had a audio fail on my podcast. So it never got published. But something that he said is, I asked, how do you live a balanced life? And because, he has so many businesses, Shark Tank, basketball, just constantly being interviewed. Everybody wants time from him. And he said, it's because I learned how to live out of balance for so long that is actually able to create better balance in my life. And what he meant by that is he hyper-focused on his business for the early part of his life. And because of that, it created so many opportunities in his life to create ecosystems and balance. And so if our health is out of balance or it's negative, it feeds into so many other areas of our life, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally. And so when we take care of the thing in our life that needs the most attention, and even if we go out of balance by giving it more attention, it actually makes other areas of our life far better. And so, Travis, through your experience, what are some of the benefits in people's lives that, as a guy, I can kind of come to expect after, I guess, having multiple chiropractic adjustments? And I'll share my experience after this.
The benefits, are really endless. I always say your health is your most important asset, because your health is what gives you the ability to care for your family and to work a career that you're passionate about, and to be able to go on vacations and create experiences and really live out the dream. So, the health, your health is super, super important. What you might experience physically is just, as we age, we definitely start waking up stiff, and during our day, we can kind of get fatigued and tired. And keeping the body adjusted and keeping that nervous system functioning at its highest, it really helps to mitigate a lot of that fatigue during the day. It helps you to feel better. The body moves well. The joints are aligned properly. So, guys kind of get the analogy of driving a vehicle. If you had, this nice truck and you hit a curb and the alignment went out in your vehicle, you can still drive it down the road, but you realize that over time you'll notice things, and when you take it in to get it serviced or whatever, you'll be told probably that things are starting to wear out unevenly. Tires are starting to kind of show wear in areas that they shouldn't. So while you can still drive that vehicle, it starts to create issues. And so that's the same thing for chiropractic. Whenever your spine is out of alignment, whenever the joints don't move properly and aren't aligned like they're supposed to, you can still go about your day. And unless you're really in tune with how you feel day in and day out, you might not realize it in the early stages. But as that begins to advance, you start to have issues. And it also creates things that you can't really feel or see until you do things like spinal x-rays and you realize that there's been some stress for a period of time, and it's starting to create wear and tear in areas that it wasn't created to have wear and tear that soon. People come in and they say, oh, I've got, we realize they have like degeneration, osteoarthritis in their neck. And they go, well, it's just because I'm an older guy. And I say, well, look, these vertebrae up top are the same age as the ones below, and they look fantastic. The ones down here are the ones that have all the stress. And so over time, it really accelerates the stress that people feel. And it really creates degeneration earlier than it should in the spine and in the joints.
Yeah. So I'm a guy that occasionally would go get a chiropractic adjustment. And ironically, there was a moment I had an accident. And from that moment forth, I started getting pretty consistent adjustments. Not that it was a lifelong injury, but for a humorous story here, I was showing some land as a real estate agent, and there are some cattle in there. Well, what I failed to realize is there was also a donkey, and donkeys are often in with cattle to help protect the cattle, because that jackass will pretty much drop kick anything that tries to attack a cow. So I walk into this cattle pen, and this donkey comes at me out of nowhere. I couldn't get back in time to the gate. And so I get myself real big and I try to spook it. And it worked. I walked over to the donkey. I pet it to let it know I was friendly. Didn't do anything. I made my mistake. I turned my back and started walking away. And then it started charging at me. And by this time, I just had to make a beeline for the gate. So I started running. And apparently, as soon as I started running, it stopped, but I didn't know that. I tried to hurdle a 6-foot cattle gate. Let's just say I got 75% to the top, hit the top, and flipped over and landed on my head and neck. And man, did it cause a lot of pain. But from that moment, I started getting adjustments, weekly for about a month. But then after that moment, it became a consistent habit in my life. And I started to realize that it allowed me not to carry as much stress and pressure in my physical body. But then it also ended up becoming an emotional outlet. Not that I went to cry or anything like that, but what I realized is it actually helped reset a lot of feelings and emotions and a lot of negativity that in my life, a lot of hardships that I'd carry week from week from week. Doesn't make it from not happening, no, but it actually has helped me in my own journey, both physically and spiritually. So Travis, as a doctor and a Christian man, a father and a husband, you could probably answer this question better than most. What are some spiritual correlations that you've learned about the nervous system and taking care of your body and being adjusted to some spiritual lessons and applications that we can apply in our life?
Yeah, that's a deep question for sure. The biggest thing, is, the scripture tells us that our body is a temple and we should do all we can to preserve it. there are things that can trigger emotional issues, and those can be physical in nature, and it can go the opposite. Physical things can trigger some emotional responses. So I think the biggest thing is to realize that you have a bigger impact in your life, in your community, in your family, whenever you are feeling good and are expressing your health to the fullest. Because again, it is unlocks so much potential for you to be a bigger impact at your job or your career, in your family, in your local church, your community. So there's massive, spiritual implications whenever you feel good, and there's also massive spiritual implications when you don't.
Yeah. So in your journey of helping people physically, what do you feel like are some things that God taught you in your own journey with this process?
Yeah, I think so much of it is, you having to realize that you get out of this life mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally what you put into it. And so that goes for your health as well. Far too often people neglect the things that are most important to them, health being one of them. And there comes a time in which if you haven't made time for it along the way, it's going to make time for itself. And so people, find themselves in situations that they wish they weren't in, and they don't feel like they want to, and it really limits their ability to have an impact. Same goes for your spirituality as well. If you're not investing daily into quiet times and relationships and scripture reading and prayer, there's going to come a time in which you're going to find yourself way off course. And so the biggest thing is just in any aspect of life, you get out of it what you put into it. And so being present and being consistent and intentional day in and day out is super important.
Yeah. So how old is your oldest child?
She just turned 14 last week.
14. So you've been a father for 14 years. I've been a father for 7. And one of the things that I have noticed in my life more recently is that if I'm not physically feeling good or mentally or emotionally, it makes it extremely difficult to show up for my family. And I don't take that lightly. So my question for you is, let's say there's an individual who they can be in mild health, poor health, I don't know. But what are some practical steps that a person can take to start transforming their physical and mental and emotional health?
I think to me, it comes down to just everyday daily decisions, and that we overcomplicate health a lot of times, but really it comes down to what you consume, and that's food and drink, and also content, what you listen to and what you read. If you're not feeding your body with high performance fuel, it's not going to perform like a high performance vehicle. So diet is crucial. Exercise. We were created to move, and I feel like that we're too sedentary. Most of us have office jobs where they're not up and they're not moving around, and so that creates a whole host of issues. So we have to move, and so that means stretching on a daily basis. That means getting out and exercising. That's super important. Sleep. We often just kind of burn it on both ends, and we're up early and we're up late, and that leads to lack of sleep. That's really how our body kind of like resets, is through rest. So we have to ensure that we're getting plenty of rest. Super stressful society as well, and so finding ways to kind of mentally reset. Reading scripture are super helpful for a lot of people, meditation, but finding ways to really check the stress. And the more you do that, the easier it gets. You take a mental time out, take a few seconds to kind of compose yourself just to get things back in order. But we need to find ways to manage stress, because that is a huge thing that destroys health. So beyond, diet and exercise, sleeping, enough hours at night, working on minimizing stress. Again, I think the nervous system is super important. So finding ways to keep that regulated. Chiropractic is great at really helping with that. But again, we often overcomplicate things, and it's not as complicated as it seems. It's just those daily activities, those daily decisions, being better at making good decisions. Nobody's perfect and nobody's expected to be perfect, but if you can make more good decisions during your day, you'll be better off at the end of that day.
Yeah, for sure. You said sleep, and I would say that and drinking water has been one of the two biggest, easiest steps that I personally have taken in my own life. When I'm making sure that I'm getting 7 hours or more of sleep, my days tend to go a lot better. And then even the quality of sleep. Recently, I don't know if you've heard of this, Travis, but I got an Aura ring, and it
Yep.
measures your sleep. And newer iWatches do that, but I have an older iWatch that doesn't do it at all very well. And it measures your heart rate, it measures your oxygen level, it measures a lot of things. And something that it alerted me to is that my oxygen kept falling while I would sleep. And so that led me to be like, well, maybe I should get a sleep study test. And I did. And it turns out I had moderate sleep apnea. I tell you what, as soon as I got a CPAP, it changed my life. Now I'm resting far, far better. Before the CPAP, I would wake up and immediately I would feel dread. I would feel anxious, on edge, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, what happens? I'm not breathing 18 minutes out of an hour, because I'll stop breathing. Well, how does my body kick itself back into gear? Well, it releases cortisol. It releases, oh golly, fight or flight endorphins. What's the word? Adrenaline. Yeah, adrenaline. It releases adrenaline. And so think about this. You're getting cortisol and adrenaline pumped into your body 18 times an hour for 7, 8, 9 hours in a row. You're going to be freaking exhausted when you wake up. And that's what was happening. And it all started by starting to track what was most important. And so, Travis, not only do I agree with everything that you're saying, but for those of you that are listening, I think it's also important what you tend to focus on expands. And so if you're keeping good track of your money, you're going to become more wealthy. If you continue to watch what you eat, you're going to be eating better food. By neglect or by not paying attention, you will reap the reward of what it means to slide into negative habits. And so not only having good habits, but then also measuring and tracking them. Because if you don't measure and track, it's easy to get off course. That's why ships keep even with cars and GPSs, you need to follow a track and a system. And so that would be my add-on advice. Travis, is there anything else that, as a father, as a husband, as someone who's seeking God, that advice that you'd want to give a guy like me and my age or position of life who is wanting to serve God in a way that makes a difference in the lives of others around me?
I think it's really important to keep into perspective that you can't just check out, put it in cruise control and just be good forever. It's daily decisions. It's the consistency of life that really, one, elongates your life, and two, gives you the maximum impact day in and day out. So every day is an opportunity to get better. And every day also, if you just take it for granted, is a day to get worse. And so really striving to be present and intentional, consistent with those decisions is what will create the impact in your family, in your church, in your community that you really, really want. And the biggest thing too is realizing that it's all worth it. It seems like it's a lot to keep up with and it's a lot to do, but really our biggest goal on this earth is to make an impact. Yeah. And the healthier we are, the more mentally engaged we are, that just gives us the chance to have a bigger impact. you
Yeah.
know, in our lives, our families, in our works, in our community.
I love what you're saying. I don't know if you've heard this before, but the reward is the journey and not the destination, which is why we need to embrace the suck along the way.
Yeah.
How many people have we seen through celebrity status have a goal, reach it, and then be absolutely miserable after? It's because that they made their goal, their process, their objection for life, something that was final. And when they reached it, they had nothing else after that. But when we choose to make it the journey, then not only do we never fully arrive, but our bodies and our minds are more geared towards the pursuit than the actual destination. Yes, eventually we want a destination. We want the gold medal. We want the sale. We want those things. But when it capsizes and ends there, then that's when people start falling into depression and anxiety and loneliness, because they're making it about arriving versus enjoying the journey and the process.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you think about people in their average day, you know, they're looking forward to Friday night. They're looking forward to Saturday. Like they're looking forward to the weekend because they feel like that's going to make their life better, or they're going to have more enjoyment. But they're really forfeiting those days of the week in which they can still make a huge impact. And when they embrace the suck, as you say, those days will become more enjoyable for them. So you want to have something to look forward to, and you want to have some kind of like work towards. But once you get there, realize that you need to recalibrate and find something else. You know, you're always wanting to kind of pursue something. You know, you're always chasing something. So yeah, there's beauty in this life, even whenever you feel like there's not. And whenever you realize that in the small moments of your day, whether it's just spending time with your kids around the dinner table, or the car ride to school, or you know, the ride to church in the morning on Sundays, like those small moments are things that you'll look back on and remember. And
Yeah,
so just, man, it's super important to have things to work towards. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, working in your day to day, and just in enjoying that time and embracing all aspects of life as often as you can.
absolutely. Well, Travis, thanks so much for coming on to the show today. And if you are a guy who is looking for community, we have a podcast. Sorry, we have a Facebook page for the Whole Person Project. And it's like-minded men who encourage one another, as well as we put tips out there. We ask questions, and we just grow together as men. So please look it up. It's the Whole Person Project on Facebook, and we'd love to have you. Travis, thanks so much for coming on to the show today, and hope you have a great day.
Evan, thank you. I appreciate it.
Take care.